Howdy, welcome back to Wobble Enjoy Sports. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider to like the content and subscribe to the channel. But if you're a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. Let's look at the Melbourne Storm's fixture for 2025. Beginning with the preseason challenge, they actually travel to New Zealand to take on the New Zealand Warriors in the city of Hamilton. And then in week number 2, they host the North Queensland Cowboys down at Casey Fields. Now into the season proper, they host the Parramatta Eels in the last game of round number 1 on Sunday afternoon footy down at Amy Park. And then they have their first bye of the year in round number 2. They still sporting bruises from the grand final, are they? I friggin' would be. And speaking of the grand final, the 2024 grand final rematch, the first part of it starts on Thursday night footy in round number 3. The Penrith Panthers travel down to Amy Park to take on the Storm, what will be one of the more anticipated games of the entire season. And then the Storm are on the road back-to-back weeks to the Dragons up at Cogra and then Manly at 4 Pines Park. And looking at it, the strength of schedule, besides Penrith, and you can argue Manly at 4 Pines Park as well, I'd say that's a pretty nice way to start the year for a runner-up in a grand final the year previously. I think there is an enormous chance that they are 4-0 after the first 5 rounds, including the 2 points that they're going to get from the bye in round number 2. Section number 2 for the Melbourne Storm starts in round number 6, where they host the New Zealand Warriors for Sunday afternoon footy. That's a 2 o'clock kickoff game against the Warriors. They're on the road, even though it's on the road to their second home up at Suncorp Stadium for Friday night footy. That is a shorter turnaround. That is their shortest turnaround to date. They play on the Sunday and then they've got to travel up to Brisbane to take on the Dolphins. But as we all know, Suncorp Stadium is the Storm's second home. And then they're back home for 3 straight weeks, in a sense. So it's the South Sydney Rabbitohs for Anzac Day clash. That's a kickoff at 8 o'clock in the evening. That's Friday night footy. Then for Magic Round in round number 9, they're the last cab off the rank. They take on the Canberra Raiders up at Suncorp Stadium, their second home, I reiterate. And then in round number 10, they host the West's Tigers. I mean, they're just at home for 1 straight month, aren't they, hey? They're the away team against the Dolphins, and then it's 3 straight home games, with one of them being up at Magic Round or up at Suncorp for Magic Round. And as far as strength of opposition goes, besides South Sydney on Anzac Day, I literally can see the Melbourne Storm after the first 10 weeks banking almost 20 points already. Like, I think their season is going to be extremely hot to start off with. They're going to be the runaway leaders, I feel, after the first 10 weeks, especially after looking at the way how their fixture has been organised. Part 3 for the Melbourne Storm begins with a clash against the Sharks at Shark Park, Saturday night footy in week number 11. Then it's followed up by a bye, their second bye for 2025, in week number 12, and that is a split round due to Origin. Round number 13, it is a few days after State of Origin game number 1 at Suncorp Stadium, and the Storm are on the Gold Coast at Cbus Super Stadium to take on the Gold Coast Titans. And this is probably the 3rd time in a row, well, it is the 3rd time in a row now, where I would suggest that probably if there's one game that could be easy for Origin stars to back up from, I'd suggest it'd be against this game against the Gold Coast Titans, considering it's only an hour and a half drive between Suncorp and Cbus Super Stadium. So this contest against the Titans maybe will not be Origin affected through a Melbourne Storm's perspective. What won't be Origin affected is the next game. They're back at home at Amy Park for the first time in a month. They host the North Queensland Cowboys in what will be a fully loaded affair Origin stars will be participating in this game. In week number 15, to round out the third part for 2025, they have their third and final bye that comes right on the halfway mark of the season. So there's not going to be any breaks, no easing on the pedal for the second half of 2025 for the Melbourne Storm, because their byes are done right on the halfway mark. So their third and final bye is a part of split round, the second split round for 2025. Their next game is against the South Sydney Rabbitohs at Accor Stadium. And that game is a few days after State of Origin game number 2, which is taking place in Perth. So I'm not anticipating any Origin stars from any club to participate in week number 16, in all honesty. But that game is away for the Melbourne Storm and is happening on Saturday night. In week number 17, they host the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks for Sunday afternoon footy for a 2 o'clock kickoff. Round 18 rears its head again, and this is a bye round fixture, or a split round. This is their first split round game, their only split round game of the year. Cowboys versus Storm, Saturday night footy. Then in round number 19, they are away to the Newcastle Knights. That is a Saturday afternoon game, Saturday 3 p.m, and that is days after State of Origin. Depending on how that goes, Origin stars might be rested for this game against the Newcastle Knights in week number 19. And then from round 20, they host the Manly Sea Eagles on Saturday night footy. So in this fourth section for the Melbourne Storm, they're away to Souths, Sharks, they're away to North Queensland, away to Newcastle. That's easily the toughest part for the Melbourne Storm so far in 2025. The race to the finals begins in round number 20. As aforementioned, they host Manly for Saturday. They host the Manly Sea Eagles for Saturday night footy. Then they're on the road back-to-back weeks. They take on the Roosters and they take on the Parramatta Eels, both at their respective venues up in Sydney. Must be noted as well that the Saturday night game against Manly is then backed up into a Thursday night clash against East. So that is their second very short turnaround for the Melbourne Storm for 2025. After the game against Parramatta in round number 22, they host the Brisbane Broncos. It is the first Storm and Broncos game for 2025, emanating on a Thursday night footy game. As a matter of fact, just while I'm looking at it, Storm feature 1, 2, 3, 4. They feature in 5 Thursday night clashes in the race to the finals and 2 Friday night Channel 9 games as well. So the Melbourne Storm, they are prime time. Again, I'll backtrack. They host the Brisbane Broncos in round number 23. They're away to the Panthers for Thursday night footy at CommBank Stadium. They then have back-to-back home games. They take on the Dogs and the Roosters, both on Friday night footy. And then to round out the year against the Brisbane Broncos up at Suncorp Stadium, which is becoming a annual tradition really in the final round of the regular season, and that could be superstar affected due to maybe resting players in the week before finals come about. What are my overall impressions on the Melbourne Storm's fixture? It starts really beautifully for them. I am not going to be surprised if we get to week number 12 and they've dropped one game. It is a fixture where I can easily see the Storm being only one loss in, almost at the halfway point of the season. But then it goes into overdrive for them as soon as their third and final bye is evaporated at the halfway point. And that race to the finals is no joke. I mean, there is the Parramatta Eels and the Broncos that didn't make the top 8 last year, but they're always up for the fight against the Melbourne Storm. And just to reiterate, that race to the finals sees Manly, Roosters, Parramatta, Broncos, Penrith, Dogs, and, well, Broncos again, Roosters again. So Roosters twice, Broncos twice. That's almost murderer's row. And if the Storm are not good enough inside the first half of 2025, I think they could be chasing their tail a little bit if they're not good enough in the second half of 2025. So I think it's I don't think it's fair to say that that's the easiest draw that I've seen, even though it's the nicest start to a draw that I've seen so far. But it levels up very, very quickly. It balances itself out extremely fast when you look at the second half of their season for 2025 for the Melbourne Storm. And there's only 2 short turnarounds in there as well, which is a great bonus for them. So if you're a Melbourne Storm fan, there's no real variety to it. Like there's not a special trip to, let's say, Perth or down to Mudgee, for example, or something like that. But I'm kind of cool with that if I'm a Melbourne Storm fan to begin with, and you would have the confidence that they can get the job done early on in the season and then be battle-hardened enough to take on, or experienced enough to take on what's coming their way in the second half of 2025. That's it for me, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for the continuous support. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, subscribe. Come check me out on my other socials, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you. Take care. Adios. #riding high 2025.